Our voice matters. Our dignity matters. We matter, body, soul, and spirit. And this is no small matter when someone is violated. This is very serious work. And so I am so honored to be here with you today and to be a part of this community event. You know, this is very encouraging to see that there are so many people here. Congratulations that there are so many people here, because we know that this is a reality. And unfortunately, this is a darkness that we all have to link arms and fight together, don't we? We absolutely have to be fighting this together, because the truth is that we are all fighting the same enemy. And the enemy is not what you would think it is. The enemy is not other people. It's not systems that sometimes fail us. It's not the process. It's not the state. It's not the paperwork. The enemy is fear. The enemy is shame. The enemy is silence. The enemy is blame. The enemy is when someone has the audacity to put another beneath them, to put someone below them, to make them powerless, to make them voiceless, to do them harm, body, soul, and spirit. But today we say that fear and shame and abuse does not have the final say. It does not have the final say, because God is sovereign and he will not be mocked. He will not be mocked, my friends. He will not. And through Gabby's story and the people that have been saved through that, through my own story and the people that have been saved through that, in the end, the enemy loses, we win. We win. We win. Spoiler alert, we win. Even if it looks like defeat in the natural, if it looks like defeat in the physical, what the eye can see our reach, our potential, our power, it goes much further beyond what we can see with the natural eye. The authority that we carry, the power that we carry, the dignity that we hold, being made in the image of God. It goes beyond this room. It goes beyond our experiences in life and in death. We win. We win. And I want you to remember that as we talk about these things today, because I personally believe this. I have personally experienced this. I know what it's like to wear the shackles of shame. I know what it's like to suffer in silence. I know what it's like to be intimidated. I know what it's like to feel like there's complete bondage. And I don't know how you're going to make it to the next minute or the next hour of the day. I know what that's like. But I also know what it's like to experience healing and freedom and deliverance from these types of bondages as well. And when you've experienced inner healing and deliverance, you want others to experience that too. You want others to walk in freedom too, to the point that you're willing to go back to ground zero and say, this will not have the final word over my life. And so you are all in here because you carry hope. You're in here because something in you says, I can make a difference. I can make this world a better place, and you absolutely can. If it weren't for someone like you, I wouldn't be alive today. If it weren't for victim services, if it weren't for the nonprofit organization, everybody working together on my behalf, the multidisciplinary team, the SANE exam, the forensic interviews, the investigators, the prosecutors, everybody working on my behalf, my counselors, my mental health counselors, I would not be standing here today. But I'm so grateful that I am. I'm grateful that I had someone like you, a victim advocate, who fought for me, who stood with me and fought for me when I didn't have the strength to fight for myself. Because there are days where you don't have strength. And I'm not talking about physical strength or the strength that we have in our muscles or in our bodies. I'm talking about inner strength. Because when you suffer from a crushed spirit, that inner strength is not there. When your soul's been broken, Your heart's been crushed. And your spirit flattened. You don't have that inner strength. And that voice, over time, as you continue to suffer for those who are victims of abuse, that voice eventually diminishes. And when I say voice, I'm not talking about the volume of my words right now. In advocacy, voice means the ability to identify your needs, but not just the ability to identify those needs, then also step 2 is to be able to express those needs, right? You can't do that if your voice has been silenced, if you've been intimidated, if you've lived under fear and oppression and bondage and abuse for too long. Eventually, that voice can be lost entirely. And so it takes people like you and people like me that comes alongside victims to help them understand what their needs are, identify those needs, express those needs. Your voice matters, your needs matter. See, a lot of victims have anxiety around the fact that they personally have needs. Think about that for a minute. Do you get anxiety sometimes about your inner needs, the things that you need, the needs that you need met sometimes? The list of to-dos keep piling, don't they? And so many victims have a lot of anxiety around the fact that they even have needs in the first place because they've been taught, they've been abused, they've been sexually assaulted, they've been taught, my needs don't matter. My needs don't matter. My voice doesn't matter. And so eventually that voice leaves. That voice that is so precious. That voice that matters. That voice that was created in the image of God, with dignity, with power, with fear, and with reverence, and with love, great love. That voice is lost. And that matters. That matters greatly. So this is sacred work. And it is truly a matter of life or death. What you do matters. Don't ever walk away from here thinking that it doesn't matter or that you're not making an impact. You know, it's interesting. I was not an at-risk child growing up, and I think people have a lot of misconceptions about sexual abuse, child sexual abuse, or domestic violence, thinking that, oh, well, this only happens to at-risk groups, right? And there's certainly something to be said for being at risk. But for me personally, in my own story, this was not the case. I was not an at-risk child growing up. I came from a very loving home, a very safe home, and I'm grateful that my home was a safe place, and not everyone can say that. But unfortunately, you know, abuse still happened. Sexual abuse still found its way in because this crime is no respecter of persons, it's no respecter of race, it's no respecter of economic status. It will find its way in, and it looks for those cracked doors. It looks for places to operate while also remaining undetected by others. And the key with predators is that they have built their success as a predator, as an abuser, on deception. They have built their success on deception because grooming is deception. At the root, sexual grooming of the mind, the body, the spirit, the environment, grooming of communities, grooming of institutions. It's all based on deception. And so I'm glad it was mentioned earlier how deceptive abusers can be. And the best way to beat this deception is through discernment, is through understanding how to be discerning. Because all of your child predators, most of them, and we're going to talk about this in detail, and we're going to share research on this, but most of your child predators, they are charming. They are likable. They are Mr. Charisma. And actually, over 93% of them claim to be religious. And they use this as a cover, as a disguise, to remain unsuspecting. It's very strategic, it's very calculated, it's very methodical. It's no misunderstanding, which is what they will try to say in the courtroom, right? Oh, this is just a misunderstanding, or so-and-so would never do something like that. How many of you have heard this in court? Oh, so-and-so would never do something like that. They would never do this. This is so out of character. And this is why through grooming they work so hard to be charming, to be likable, to be deceptive, so that these exact words will be spoken about their character. So we're going to talk a lot about that and how grooming works. But as a victim of the grooming process, because grooming is a process, it's not just a one-time thing, it was all hidden in plain sight, and I never saw it. And my caregivers never saw it. The institution, the school that I went to never saw it. And so I grew up having a very comfortable, a very happy, a very safe life. And my mom even accepted a teaching position at a private Christian school. And she assured us this would be a safe place for us. And we knew Mom was just right down the hallway if we ever needed anything. But unfortunately, it's in this private Christian school where I first met evil. Because it's the perfect place for evil, people who have wicked intent. It's the perfect place to hide. Perfect place to hide. And offender studies actually show that just by nature of stepping onto a religious-based campus, and this is for all denominations, just by nature of stepping onto that campus, they are more unsuspecting than if they were to step on a different campus. Because they can hide. They can talk the talk. They can walk the walk. They know what to say. They know what to do. They know how to act. Especially a lot of faith-based institutions push volunteering. They push serving. There's nothing wrong with that, but what kind of people are looking at that as an access point? It's an access point. And so unfortunately that was the case for me personally, which is why I'm talking about this. Through my own story, I knew that my parents made sacrifices. So when I was in the second grade, we went to this private school, and I knew it was a big change. I knew it was a bold move for my family. I knew that they were making financial sacrifices to put me in this private school along with my two sisters to make sure that these exact risks didn't happen. Yet they still happened. Why? Because it was all in plain sight. The grooming was happening in front of all of us. See, these offenders are so skilled. They don't just groom the primary victim, they groom the secondary victims, they groom families, they groom caregivers, they groom institutions, they groom communities. It's easier to fool someone than to convince someone that they have been fooled. Think about that for a minute. It's so much easier to fool. You know why? Because of pride. Pride. Pride will bring you very low. Oh, that would never happen at my Christian school. Well, that would never happen to where I send my child to camp. Well, that would never happen at this church. That's exactly what a predator wants you to say. That's exactly what an abuser wants you to say. That means you've had no awareness conversation. That means you're doing no safeguarding. You have no defense. You're completely unaware that you could be a target. See, an offender is going to go to the institution that has had prevention education training, that has a response protocol for disclosures and abuse. They're not going to go to a place that has the proper policies in place. They're going to go around the corner where they say, oh, something like this would never happen, and because of that, we don't need to be equipped. Because of that, we don't need to train our people on recognizing and reporting. We don't need to train our people on mandatory reporting. And so sometimes institutions like that even believe that they are above the law. Have you seen this? Too often we've seen this. They believe that they are above the law. And that's going to get an institution in a lot of trouble. So it's in this place where I met family friends. And my sisters and I became best friends with siblings at this private school in 2nd grade, okay? And we did everything with this family. Just think about, the families that you do life with. Families that you do life with. So we went on vacations together. It's because, my friend and I, we were in the same extracurricular activities. And their mom also worked up at the school that we went to. So it was very convenient to be around this family. Same extracurricular activities, same school schedule. We were in the same sports teams, and they lived in the neighborhood right near us. So it was very convenient to be around this family. And we went on family vacations together, holidays, birthdays, Christmas. We were just with this family. It became very easy to be with this family. But little did I know that my best friend's father, who also played the role of a basketball coach in my life, would end up sexually abusing me. And not once, but many times, and for many years. How do you tell your best friend that their father is a monster? How do you tell the sweet wife that works up at the school, how do you tell her as a youth who her husband really is? That's too heavy of a burden for any child or youth to bear. Too heavy of a burden. No child or youth or any person should ever carry this burden of bondage. Because there is a very high cost to silence, I learned. A very high cost to the mind, to the body, and to the spirit. And we'll talk about this later, but I remember when it moved from non-contact grooming, because you have non-contact grooming and then you have contact sexual grooming. There's a difference, and both are equally traumatic, research shows. But I remember when it moved from non-contact grooming into physical grooming, and it was a situation that he had planned and he had premeditated and he had calculated ahead of time through the guise of being pro-social. So he was pretending to be pro-social. He was pretending to offer a helping hand when he called my father and said, you know what, the kids have been over here at my house playing, and it was late at night. It was dark outside, and he said, don't worry about bringing her by. Why don't I will offer to bring her to your house so that you don't have to get in the car and come pick her up. What a nice offer from a nice guy. You probably know where this is going. So he offers a helping hand. Sure, thank you, friend. This had happened several times. But there was something different about this time. I'd been in the car with him many times, but there was something different about this time. And he parked the car in front of my own home, right? Most sexual assault happens within a mile from the victim's home. Parked the car right in front of my parents' home. And it was low lit outside, it was dark, and locked the doors. And that was the first time that it moved into physical sexual assault. So close to safety, yet so far from help. So close, I can see my house. That's hard. That's hard. And of course, I was threatened not to tell, like so many victims. The shame, the blame, the fear, the guilt, right? I felt feelings I'd never felt in my young life before. I felt changed forever. There was no amount of showering I could do to get that dirty, clammy feeling off of me, and I was threatened not to tell. I was told all of the classic things that abusers do post-abuse maintenance. It's post-abuse maintenance for them. My life was threatened. If you tell, it's an if then. If you tell, then you'll get in a lot of trouble. If you tell, you'll ruin your chances at a basketball scholarship. If you tell, see, part of why grooming works, it works. If you don't know what's happening to you, it works. It works. Is because they look for those vulnerabilities. They take the time to get to know the victim. They watch, they observe. What is it they care about? What need can I meet? What role can I fill in their life? Then I'll meet that need. Then I'll fill that role. And then I'll hook them with that. And I'll use that against them. Classic. It's textbook. It hasn't changed since the beginning of time. Deception, grooming, promoting that which is forbidden as something that's good, as something that's desirable, as something that's enticing. Dragging you down a road you don't want to go down. Classical, textbook sexual grooming. The problem with sexual assault and sexual grooming is that it doesn't always happen every time, right? I never knew if I was in a situation where I was safe or unsafe because it didn't happen every time. Sometimes we're okay. It didn't happen for weeks or months and you're relieved, so maybe you can let your guard down a little bit. But then there's another strike when you least expect it. And so that's where the post-traumatic stress comes in, because you never really know if you're going to be safe or not, even in situations where you are safe. And so that happened to me for years. For years. I never really knew if I was going to be safe or not. And I changed in almost every way possible. Because eventually, trauma will manifest itself. What happens to the body, the soul, and the spirit will manifest, and you will see physical signs, you will see patterns of behavior, you will see changes, you will see that manifestation of what's really going on beneath the surface. And that's what happened in my life. I changed in every way possible. I went from making good grades to failing. I went from being very outgoing, very social, very loving, very kind, to being very angry, very depressed. I was self-harming. I had self-hatred, low self-esteem, low self-worth. I was suicidal. I had anxiety. I was having night terrors. A lot of your classic symptoms from being victimized sexually. Meanwhile, the people around me are scratching their heads going, we can't figure out what's wrong with Jenna. What is wrong with Jenna? And it got so bad that I even went to the emergency room twice because my body broke out in hives from the stress. And even in the emergency room, as I'm being treated for a hives outbreak, the perpetrator's wife came to check on me and said, we're here for you. Let us know if you need anything from us. We'll be praying for you. That's hard. But unfortunately, over 93% of the time, a child or youth is sexually abused by someone that they know, someone that they trust, and oftentimes it's someone that they love. Because that person in their life has worked hard to win their love. It's part of the grooming. It's part of the grooming process. But unfortunately, my hospital visits did not stop at the emergency room. Now my parents, my teachers, those around me that cared for me are really troubled. They're really scratching their heads. They're saying, what is wrong with Jenna? We can't figure out what's wrong with this young, sweet girl. And so I was tested for all sorts of different things. I was tested for learning disabilities. Physiologically, my parents did the best they could with the information that they had and the knowledge that they had, which was, try to find a physiological reason, trying to find a diagnosis for what's happening to their young daughter. So they tested to see if I was anemic. They tested to see if I had any other underlying health conditions. They tested my thyroid, low energy, depression, my hair is falling out, trauma. But unfortunately, they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. Physiologically, I was healthy and I did not have a learning disability. All my results were negative. She's healthy, she's okay. Meanwhile, the doctors are not looking for trauma. They're looking for what's on the surface. They have their checklists. Things have changed since then, but I went right under the radar, hidden in plain sight. Emergency room, medical doctors, pediatricians, psychologists. No one was asking the right questions. My parents spent a lot of time and they spent a lot of money trying to figure out what was wrong with their poor daughter. And meanwhile, things are getting darker for me. Things are getting harder. It's getting harder to keep up with the day. It's getting harder to keep up with all the demands from school and sports. And the scheduling and the pressure of being young in the first place is hard, right? So at this point, I'm 16 years old. And the only plan that I can see, the only way out that I can see, is to let myself leave this earth on my own time. And so I had a plan, and I was going to carry it out. And it was actually during the holiday season. And, I have an acronym for faith. It's full assurance in the heart. It's something that you know to be true. It's a substance that you know that's real, but you can't see it. You can't prove it, but you can feel it, and you know it's there. And so my older sister, Stephanie, at this point, it's Christmas holiday season. And my sister Stephanie asked me to go to lunch with her the next day, the day after Christmas. And so we did what we always did with this family. We did a gift exchange with them. We spent Christmas Eve and we spent Christmas Day with this family. And I was so excited the day after Christmas. I finally got the chance to go see my big sister because she had just had her first year away at college. And I wanted to know all about college. What's college like? Tell me there's life after this. And we were together and we're having lunch. And she promises, she does something really interesting. She looks at me and she says, Jenna, I'm going to ask you a question and you have to promise to tell me the truth. And it's like there's a shift. There was a shift in the room, it felt like. Because we're just talking and then she says, I'm going to ask you a question and you have to promise to tell me the truth. And as a younger sister, of course I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I borrowed her brand new shirt and I didn't put it back in the closet where it belongs. I borrowed her shoes and her accessories. That's it, I'm busted. Anybody with daughters or sisters knows that borrowing accessories and borrowing clothes is just a regular thing, right? The question was this, she said, has anyone ever hurt you? And without saying a single word, I gave her an answer. I just started bawling uncontrollably. I just started crying and crying and crying, and I could not hold back the tears any longer. And I'm falling apart right here in front of her at this restaurant. And it was this big scene, and the server was avoiding us several times. You know, these two young girls, drama. And I realized I had given her an answer without saying anything. And that reality caught up with me, and she waited for me to gain my composure, and then I said, yes, yes, but. Yes, but. And then I started to rehearse, and I started to tell her all the things that the offender had told me. I said, yes, but you wouldn't believe me. You know this person and you know this person well. It would ruin everything if I told you, right? I started telling her all the lies that I had been fed. All the lies that I had started to believe over time. Because over time I started to believe those lies that shame whispered to my soul. Maybe it's your fault. Maybe you're a bad person. Maybe you did something to deserve this. So I started to rehearse these things to her. And my older sister is kind of bossy. So she said, no, I don't know who you are. I don't know who you've become, but I want my sister back. I want my sister back. She could tell I was had turned into a completely different person from this trauma, from this abuse, from the horrible things that had happened to me. And she was not going to tolerate it. She was not going to tolerate it. And I said, okay, I'll tell you who it is. But the reality is that that day, love was stronger than fear. Love is stronger than fear, and we have to remember these things. Because the truth is that when we talk about fear, it's not faith that we need to combat fear. Sure, faith is important, but really, what really casts out fear is love. Love is what casts out fear. I knew that she was asking me and she was approaching me from a place of love, from a place of restoration, from a place of, I'm not going to judge you. I'm here to love you and I'm here to help restore. I'm here to right every wrong that's happened in your life. And that's the approach that we need to take. Can someone tell you something without you judging them? Can you just love them and tell them, I'm going to support you and I'm going to get you help? Because we can preach to people all day what they need to be doing, but if there's no love behind it, it's empty. It's love that truly transforms people and propels them into a place of excellence, into a place of overcoming, into a place of victory, where they actually want to change, where they actually want to get out of that situation, where they actually want to be a better person, where they actually want to make a difference. Permanent help, permanent victory. Love is what propels that. Love. And so I knew she was a safe person. I knew that she was someone I could trust at that right time. And so I told her, and her jaw dropped to the floor. She did all the right things on how to respond to a disclosure. But there was one thing, there was just one thing that she couldn't help. And that was, girl, watch your face. Her facial expression. And she had to cover her mouth because, yeah, that's shocking, isn't it? You better believe it. That is shocking. Because she was thinking, well, a boy at school or a friend or bullying or something like that. There's no way she was thinking this is criminal activity here. And so that night we told my parents. She called a family meeting, and even still getting that information out was like pulling teeth, because I did what a lot of youth try to do, and I said, listen, let's just keep this between us. I don't want anybody knowing. I don't want any backlash. Can we just keep this between us, and I will tell once I'm graduated and I'm out of this town. And she was like, no, we're not doing that. I want you free. I want you out of this, and people need to know. And we told my parents that night. And so there's no words for how they felt, right? The secondary victims are the parents, and they felt overwhelming guilt, right? Like, we let this person into our home. We allowed you to take trips with this family. I can't believe we didn't see it. Now, looking back in hindsight, it was all there in plain sight, the grooming, but you don't know what you don't know. And so they suffered from a lot of guilt. And the pain of betrayal is so deep when it's someone that you know and someone that you've trusted. And you start to question your own vulnerabilities, and you start to question your own choices as a parent. And so my dad, you'll appreciate this, my dad didn't say many words, but he did get up from the couch. And it's wintertime, so he gets up from the couch, he goes and he grabs his jacket, and he grabs his .38, and he says, I'm just going to go talk to him with his .38 revolver. But that's a father's heart. That's a father's heart. I want to protect. I want to avenge. And he started towards the door. And actually, truth be told, the only reason we even called 911 was for him. He was the one who called 911, my father. And he said, you better get over here, and you better get over here quick before I do something. And he was ready to make a bad situation worse, which, how many of you know that that happens? That defense, that protector comes out. And he was about to make a bad situation worse. And so from there, everything changed. And things got worse before they got better. And I was so suicidal at age 16 that I only had two options. It was either Green Oaks Mental Hospital or the Children's Advocacy Center, locally run. Is there anyone here from the Children's Advocacy Centers? Wonderful, thank you. And I'm telling you, victim advocacy, this work changes lives, but it does so much more than that. It doesn't just change lives, it doesn't just change families, it doesn't just change the trajectory of someone's life, it transforms it. There's a difference, there's a very clear difference between change and transformation. Because I don't want to just do all this work to get back to baseline. I got to do all this work in trauma therapy just to get back to who I was before? No, I want to be transformed. I want to be a new creation. I want to be something new where I look and I walk and people see me and they say, I don't believe you've been through what you've been through. That's what we want for every single victim. So everywhere they walk, darkness can't stand. Everywhere they go, darkness shudders, fear turns around and goes the other way. Because fear knows, darkness knows, evil knows, manipulation knows, grooming knows, the lies know. They can't stand where someone has been glorified in the light and has no tolerance for evil things. And that's where we are today, where we have to make a choice. We can tolerate it. We can compromise with it. We can negotiate with it. Or we can send its bags packing, say, go back to hell where you came from because you have no place here. That's where we need to be. And we have too many bystanders that are weak and they're afraid and they cower in fear. Let me tell you something. Predators and abusers are counting on bystanders to be cowards. They're counting on you to be a coward. The enemy loves passive people, where they can work in plain sight, unconfronted. We are called to confront, my beautiful friends. You are here in this room because you are a confronter. You are on the front lines for a reason. And I want you to leave here empowered. I want you to leave here knowing that it makes a difference on those hard days. And I know that there is a cost to you. There is a cost to you on those hard days. And many of you have come into this work because of your own trauma, because of your own experience. So I want to acknowledge that I'm not the only survivor in this room. Many of us in this room, men and women, have been victims of sexual assault, and that unites us together. And we can have compassion for those who have been through something like this. And so I want to acknowledge all of the survivors in the room today. All of those silent battles that you have fought, all of those silent struggles, those silent wars that you've been in. I want to acknowledge you and I want to honor you for those battles that you have won today. You are much stronger than you think. To have gone through something like this and then to go back into the fire to save your brothers and your sisters. I want to honor you for doing that today and for being in this room. And I want to tell you that I love you. I want to tell you that I love you because you're making a difference. You're transforming lives. You're not just changing them, you're transforming them. It is working. It is making a difference. Because when you're in a state of crisis, you don't know how to properly look at someone and say, thank you so much for all of the help. We can't do that. I don't think I ever said thank you when I was actually going through the services at the Children's Advocacy Center. I don't think I did. I've said thanks many times since then, but when you're in that state of crisis, you can't say thank you. So I want to thank you all today. And there was a real clear moment that happened when I was having my SANE exam, the sexual assault nurse exam, at the Children's Advocacy Center, and my mom went with me after the report was made. And she's nervous, she's in the lobby, and to pass the time, she's looking at this, little pamphlet with bullet points on it. And there's this little pamphlet that she looks at while I'm having my SANE exam. And this little pamphlet says, warning signs a child or youth may display if they've been sexually abused. And she gets out a pen from her purse and she starts to check off over 80% of those warning signs that I had displayed for years. For years. And she couldn't believe this. I was all summed up on one little bullet page pamphlet, and she thought if I had seen this information sooner, I could have stopped this from happening, or at least stopped it from happening for as long as it went on. As an educator, with many years of public and private education, she had never seen this information. And secondly, as a parent, she had never learned this information. She had spent a lot of time and a lot of money trying to figure out what is wrong with her daughter. And there I was, summed up on a tiny little bullet point pamphlet. And so from her experience as an educator and a mandatory reporter, not having the proper training, is what Jim talked about earlier. So from her experience as an educator and my experience as a youth, not having opportunities to disclose or to report, the idea for Jenna's Law was born. You see, when you're a victim going through these types of things, especially if you're a child or a youth, I never saw a prevention conversation happen in any of my safe places. There wasn't a body safety conversation or an awareness conversation. In any of my safe places, my parents didn't have a body safety conversation with me. My school didn't have a body safety conversation with me. My church or youth group never had a body safety conversation with me. So I concluded this must be something that's better left unspoken. And that's the message that we send to children and youth and other victims when we aren't the first ones as safe people to open that door of communication for them and to bridge that gap, that disclosure gap for them to make reporting as painless as possible. Because we can't expect them to be able to use their voice because they've lost it. Think about how powerful that is. They've lost it. How can they report? How can they identify their needs? How can they piece the information back together for a report? It's too traumatizing. And so I'm so grateful that I had the Children's Advocacy Center and the multidisciplinary team working on my behalf. And Most importantly, there was not a financial cost to it, right? Because my dad started to become depressed, and he's a business owner, so his business sales tanked. He's crying, he's depressed. My parents are on antidepressants. They are really struggling. And how do you think that makes me feel when I see that my parents are struggling? I think, I did that. It's my fault. They're struggling. That's a false sense of responsibility, a false sense of shame, a false sense of blame, which you will see nearly 100% of the time in almost every victim of sexual abuse. That false sense of shame and blame. But thank goodness, with the multidisciplinary team, the investigators, the prosecutors, the jury gave the perpetrator 70 years in prison. 70 years. And I'm just one youth that went through the services of an advocacy center. Just one. Imagine what all the other victims will go and do with their lives once they've had the proper therapy, once they've had the proper counseling, once they've had those years of lies corrected. Because the truth is that children and youth, they don't stay children and youth. They grow up. And they will one day enter into a relationship, and they will one day enter into the workforce, and they will one day become members of a community. And what kinds of interactions will they have if they haven't had their trauma healed? So this is a ripple effect, a complete ripple effect. So recent research has shown on grooming, on why it works. Why it works, and it does work. So Winters and Jaglick, Dr. Jaglick is a close friend of mine, and she has groundbreaking research on grooming. And look at this study. This study shows, it found that 99% of a sample of 100 adult victims of child sexual abuse self-reported having at least one sexual grooming behavior before the offense process. So what these researchers say is that sexual grooming now is synonymous with sexual abuse because it is incorporated so much. We see this grooming in person, we see this grooming online, and it looks the same whether it's in person, whether it's online, and regardless of the age. This works for elderly abuse grooming too as well. So the research study is fascinating. I suggest you dive deeper into this if you deal with this. It's wonderful for corroboration. Grooming is corroboration. You can prove on the witness stand that a perpetrator groomed their victim, because many times these perpetrators, they'll get up on the witness stand and they'll brag. They will brag and brag and brag, and they will talk about all the things they did to groom the victim. I was the only one that was there for them. I met this need. I helped them in this time of need. I took them here, I took them there, I stepped in, I filled this role. And it's like, keep talking, because you're showing everybody how you have groomed this victim. Okay? What makes sexual grooming even more of a threat is that there seems to be a hindsight bias. And I mentioned this a little bit earlier briefly, meaning that people tend to overestimate the likelihood that they would have ever recognized the behavior in the first place, right? Most people are like, I think I'd know if someone was an abuser. I think I'd know if someone was a predator. And the reality is that no, they look very normal, don't they? Like from a picture or from social media, it's like, oh, this person looks pretty normal. They don't look like they would do something like that. And so we learned that it's very difficult for people to detect. And there's further evidence to suggest that people have a difficult time identifying sexual grooming as potentially predatory. So even if they do identify it, they might say, well, it's really more pro-social behavior anyway. Because they're offering to step in, they're offering to help, they're offering to fill a role or meet a need once they find what that vulnerability is. Not only are these behaviors not easily recognized by others, but also the likelihood of the victim disclosing the abuse may be reduced when sexual grooming is involved. So then we're looking at disclosure rates. The likelihood of disclosing this reduces if there is grooming involved, and 99% of the time there is sexual grooming involved when we look at sexual assault. This is a calculated process. It is not a one-time event. Many predators will groom depending on it's in person or online. Many predators will groom for days, for weeks, sometimes even for years they will groom. And the aim is to target vulnerabilities and desensitize the victim to sexual content. So an extended definition of this, and it has changed since the FBI first coined grooming in the 1970s. The definition has changed as the criminology has changed. So this is a process, and I'm so glad that they point to it as a process, because it is a complex process in which a predator prepares a victim and the people around the victim and even the environment. Okay, so it's very complex, it's very multifaceted. They prepare them for abuse, okay? So the aim is to prevent detection from other people, right? The greatest battle strategy is to be able to carry out your destructive acts while at the same time remaining undetected. And that's how sexual assault, domestic violence, child sexual abuse, all of these sexual crimes can thrive, not for months, but for many years sometimes. They remain undetected. 2, preventing disclosures. They don't want that victim to report. They don't want that victim to tell. They don't want that victim to make an outcry, okay? So this is included in the grooming process. And then the third aim is to be able to facilitate future abuse, right? If I can do 1 and I can do 2, then I can do 3. I can continue to abuse. So it's very methodical. So Winters and Jeglick has 5 stages. It's changed, like I said, over the last few decades. There used to be 7 stages. So whether you've seen 7 stages of grooming or 5 or 10, they're all really saying the same thing. It just depends on the researcher and what they're focusing on. But the first is victim selection. I always tell survivors, you were picked. You were targeted. You did not do something to bring this on. You did not ask for this. You are not asking for this. We have to correct those lies that they have believed over time, those lies they've been fed. So number 1, victim selection. Most abusers can walk into a mall, or they can walk into a club, or they can walk into a park, depending on who their primary victim is, and they can observe through surveillance, and they can say, I think I'm going to pick that one. And much of grooming is a litmus test, where they test the waters, and they test the waters, and they say, okay, this worked, that didn't work, so I'm going to try something else now. So victim selection is number 1. Number 2, gaining access and isolation. They have to then gain access somehow to their preferred victim type. And this makes a lot of sense. One example I can share is an online predator who joined online an eating disorder group with males and females. And he joined this online eating disorder group, and from that group, he was able to pick off a few girls, and then from that few, he was able to narrow it down to 1 girl who he built her up, and he, helped her self-esteem. And that's helpful if you already have a low self-esteem, right? So he picked a vulnerability. That was the vulnerability that he picked, eating disorder group. And unfortunately, over the course of a few months, they actually ended up meeting up, and you can guess what probably happened. But thank goodness the perpetrator, he was caught, he was convicted, and he's not able to do that anymore. But this is a very common in person and online. They have to gain access, and then after gaining access, they have to somehow isolate, whether in person or online, okay? Trust and development. They have to find a way in. They have to build rapport somehow. Number 4, desensitization to sexual content and physical contact. I mean, that's not till number 4. And then number 5 is post-abuse maintenance behavior. The things that they will say to use fear and threats and intimidation. This is very normal to be able to continue to perpetuate that cycle, okay? I'll give you an example. I was giving a law enforcement training in Michigan, and I had a conversation afterwards with one of the law enforcement members, and he had never seen this grooming before, and he said, everything that you mentioned, I've never heard this before, and I've personally gone through all of this. And he starts to open up and he starts to share his story. And I said, do you mind if I share this in some of my lectures? And he said, absolutely. What happened with him is he came from a single family home. His mom raised him. And they lived in a decent community. Their neighbor was a very nice man, retired, a veteran, a beloved member of the community, as many child predators are. And he saw that this single mom had needs. Most single moms have a lot of needs that need to be met. And he would come over, he would mow the lawn for her, he would fix appliances if appliances needed to be fixed, things like that. And he picked up on the fact that this little boy, his dream of all dreams, this little boy's dream was to learn to play guitar. He wanted to be in a rock band. He loved music. Music was his outlet, and he really wanted to learn to play guitar. And so the mom could not afford to purchase a guitar, let alone pay for guitar lessons. So they're saving up, and he's still hoping and believing and dreaming that one day I'm going to get a guitar and I'm going to learn how to play guitar. Well, this neighbor, who's a veteran, very nice man, said, hey, I've got several guitars. I know how to play guitar. You can just come over and I'll teach you, and I won't charge you anything. And so the mom was relieved. She was so relieved. I don't have to save up anymore. I don't have to pay for guitar lessons. And you can probably figure out where this is going right now. But it didn't happen the first time he went over there. He would have lessons. It didn't happen the second or the third or the fourth or even the fifth time, because this man had to establish rapport. He had to build trust. Like, see, I am really teaching you how to play guitar. So it wasn't until he started to get confident, where he started to really learn guitar, that he moved in from non-contact grooming to contact sexual abuse, into contact grooming. And of course, the little boy was devastated, but he didn't feel like he could tell his mom. He never told his mom. And he said he didn't want to lose the ability to continue to learn to play guitar. It meant that much to him. So this abuser found that role, found that need that needed to be met, and filled it, and used that against the little boy. Now, like I said earlier, trauma will manifest. It will find its way, it will roar its head, it will say, I need to be heard, I need to be heard, I need to be healed. And so he, as a law enforcement agent said, I was suicidal and I'm riding around in my car with a loaded gun. This isn't good, I need to get help. I need to get help for what I went through when I was younger. And so he's doing well now, and he didn't realize that learning this information was healing for him. He didn't do anything wrong. He was picked, he was targeted, he was methodically groomed. It was systematic. And it was really helpful for him to see this information. And I feel like education is healing, awareness is healing. When you've been through something and then you can start learning about it, right? I mean, what's the first thing you do if you're diagnosed with some sort of illness? You get educated on it. You learn. It also works both ways. It works for prevention too. It works for prevention. So the 5 stages of grooming are victim selection, gaining access and isolation, trust development, desensitization to sexual contact and physical contact, and then post-abuse maintenance behaviors. This is no misunderstanding, and this is no mistake, regardless of how predators will try to deceive. When they are questioned and when they are interrogated, remember that they are master manipulators. They have built their success as abusers and predators based on being deceptive. So you've got to remember that. So moderate risk, high risk, and enhanced risk. We're going to go through these. Let's see. There it is. Okay. Enhanced, moderate, and high risk. This is from Dr. Jeglick's research. So enhanced, we see that the person does activities with that victim. They give that victim a lot of attention. Okay? It's all about building rapport. It's all about building that trust. And so research also shows that online there are two things that work best on young girl victims. The two things that work best, according to research, are number one, telling a girl, I love you. And number two, telling a girl that she's beautiful. Saying I love you and saying you are beautiful to a young girl generally works when it comes to building rapport and building self-esteem. This works on predators, and it can happen very quickly. So giving that person attention, spending time with them in person or online, giving affection. There's a lot of things that work that can be said for young girls, especially if the predator has surveillanced them, if they've been watching them, either in person or online, without them knowing it. So enhanced, then it moves into moderate risk. What's moderate risk? So the person starts talking to the victim, maybe asking questions about sexual experiences or asking about past relationships. Most of this grooming I have personally experienced. So for me, the predator would ask me, oh, are there any boys you like? Or what types of boys do you like? Different personal questions like this. They kind of seem harmless, don't they? But they're leading down a road you don't want to go on. And that's where we have to stop in this grooming process, where we have to show and teach people that this is not a conversation that you should be having, because there's more to come. This is not where this conversation ends. The person gives them, sometimes I've seen it as jokes. So this is on the research as well. The person gives inappropriate sexual language or jokes. And so I'll give you another example online. There was a wrestling coach who was, coaching a young group of boy wrestlers. And as a joke, he, I don't know why you would do this, because if you're doing this through the phone, if you're doing this online, you're very likely to get caught. But as a joke, again, just as a litmus test to see, are they going to react, or are they going to respond? Are they going to shut you down? How are they going to respond to this? So he had this funny joke where he told the boys, let's do a challenge. And the challenge was, let's see whose is larger. So he had them take pictures of themselves and send them in the group chat. Some of the boys were like, nope, hard stop, not doing that. But some of them thought, oh, this is kind of funny, right? Seems harmless, just a joke. It's just a challenge. And so from the ones that did move forward with that challenge, he was able to pick off 2 victims from that, and then gain more access to them and break down more of those boundaries and sexually groom and abuse those 2 boys. Again, this predator has also been apprehended, which is why I'm telling the story, but there's so many different ways that this could play out. I have examples for days, but they are very manipulative. They're very tricky, right? They are crafty. They are excellent at scheming when it comes to how can I break down, how can I desensitize, how can I break down those barriers. Another big one is teaching sexual education. I was told, I'm just going to teach you how to be a good wife one day, or I just want to teach you how to please your husband. A lot of people hear that one. That's a big one. And that's an education defense. It's used for grooming all the time. All the time. It's not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate. High risk, that's not even high risk. Here's high risk. High risk is that person starts to increase touching over time. And sometimes breaking down those physical barriers doesn't always start as full-on rape or sexual assault. Sometimes it does, but when there is grooming involved, it's a very subtle process. So it might start with massages or pats on the knee, different things like that, where it breaks down those physical barriers and then moves into sexual contact. The person engages in seemingly innocent or non-sexual touch. The person uses accidental touching or a distraction while touching the victim. So accidental, whoops, that was an accident, didn't mean to do that. That one's played a lot by offenders. Obviously, pornography, asking the child or the victim to watch pornography when they don't want to, or showing them against their will, or then of course asking them to do things, asking for pictures, asking for them to send images or videos. That's used a lot as well. And then the person opens up about their past sexual experiences. This is a big one, and this happened to me as well. He started to divulge some of his previous marriages and some of the previous sexual things. If I didn't give him information about my own hormones and my own body, because he would ask, have you started your period yet? Grooming, litmus test, trying to check. Okay, if I rape her, she's gonna get pregnant. We realize now what these questions are. But when you're a victim, you don't know, why is this person asking me these questions? It's just embarrassing, it's just uncomfortable, it's just weird. So predators should not be asking children or youth or anyone these sorts of questions, right? So if I shut down, he would open up. And so he would tell me things that he would do with his wife in bed. Completely inappropriate, completely criminal. Sexual grooming. Again, haven't been touched yet, but I'm hearing all of these things. Doesn't seem like I should report on this. It's just conversation. I wish I had had a Jenna's Law training. I wish I had learned about the red flag grooming indicators. By the time it gets to high risk, you already feel like you're a willing party. You already feel like maybe I should have said something sooner. And that's why grooming works. Offenders rarely begin with physical abuse. They begin with access, trust, and testing boundaries. Many offenders intentionally pursue positions that provide trust, authority, access, credibility, and reduced suspicion. These are the perfect places for a predator to hide. This includes pastors, youth leaders, ministry volunteers, and spiritual mentors. It's the perfect place to abuse your power and also remain unsuspecting. So I want to talk a little bit about the spiritual impact of abuse, because that's what my ministry does because of the experience that I had. So what's interesting is that I'm glad you mentioned ACEs earlier, because in the same way we know that there is an impact to the body, to the brain, from trauma and to all parts of who you are, there's also a spiritual impact, research shows. There's a spiritual impact from sexual abuse specifically. A study of 527 child abuse victims found that there is a significant spiritual injury. And these injuries included feelings of guilt, anger, grief, despair, doubt, and belief that God is unfair. Research from SMU, very recent research, has actually shown that when spiritual health is addressed, it predetermines breakthrough in mental health and physical health. Because a crushed spirit, who can bear? The answer is no one. And it doesn't work the other way around. So you can have something happen to your physical body. You can have, a leg broken, or you can have a surgery, or you can have some sort of illness in your body. But you know what? Generally, maybe you're still in good spirits, right? Like, I've got this cast on for 6 weeks, but I'm still in good spirits. My spirit's not broken. I'm okay. There's things going on in my mind and my body, but I'm in good spirits. But it doesn't work the other way around. Because as the spirit of a person goes, so goes the rest of that person. And we actually see that there is a direct correlation in the scriptures between sexual assault and a crushed spirit. In the Proverbs, it says, a perverse tongue crushes the spirit. The perverse tongue can be used in grooming and to do a lot of other horrible, wicked sexual acts. And that, my friends, is what breaks the spirit, because it impacts every part of the person. We actually have a program, if you're interested, afterwards, that does address the impact of the spirit. And it's very profound. We see this used with trafficking victims and adult survivors of any type of sexual trauma, because the effects are the same, right? The post-traumatic stress, the anxiety, the depression, the insomnia, the night terrors, the low self-worth, the effects are equivalent throughout, regardless of the type of sexual trauma that it was. Warning signs of spiritual grooming. This is very key. And this happens, and it goes more undetected than if it happens in any other place that's not faith-based. So I'll go through this quickly and then I'll close. They claim unique spiritual authority over a victim. This is spiritual grooming. Discourage outside accountability from other sources. Use scripture to suppress disclosure. That is not biblical. It is for freedom that Christ came, not to be silenced or held in bondage. He came to destroy the works of darkness, not participate in them. So many times, religious people will use scripture to suppress disclosure. This is wicked. Create dependency disguised as discipleship. Isolate vulnerable youth. Isolate emotionally vulnerable youth. Blur mentorship and emotional intimacy. Position themselves as God's chosen voice specifically for the victim. This is manipulation. Discourage any questioning and portray themselves as above suspicion. Watch out for this spiritual grooming, because this is an abuse of power, an abuse of authority. Sexual grooming is extremely traumatic. Following a grooming experience, the victim may suffer numerous negative effects such as embarrassment, irritability, anxiety, stress, depression, and substance abuse. Non-contact sexual abuse through grooming can cause severe trauma, fear, and paralysis to report. This is non-contact. Even in the absence of physical sexual abuse, the victim may be traumatized and suffer long-lasting emotional damage caused by non-contact sexual abuse. The process of grooming in early non-contact stages is debilitating enough to cause fear and paralysis. This is why we should not minimize grooming. We should not minimize these red flags. We should not minimize or suppress or deny the experiences of survivors that have been sexually groomed, even if it hasn't gotten to the point of contact sexual abuse, because of the trauma, the lasting trauma of grooming and its effects. Post-abuse maintenance behaviors. There's a lot of things that offenders will say. Many times your life is threatened. Many times they will threaten you, with what you fear you may lose. Many times they misassign responsibility, right? And they blame the victim. If you tell, you will get in a lot of trouble. You will ruin my life. You will ruin the family. You will ruin your life. Or they'll say, you will get in a lot of trouble, or you will get me in a lot of trouble if you tell, right? So they misassign that responsibility. Shaming, of course, we see that shame is a natural part of this, and we talk about this in the course and in the book as well. But shame is fundamentally, we see 100% of the time in survivors of sexual abuse, we see a false sense of shame and blame. The education defense, right? They just say, oh, I'm just trying to teach you about your body, or I'm just trying to teach you how to be a good partner, or I'm just trying to teach you about what other people like, okay? So that education is used as a defense. The altruistic defense, right? So I'm just trying to help you, saying that what they are doing, the criminal acts that they are doing, is somehow a benefit to them, okay? That's the altruistic defense. Be on the lookout for that. And then there's also the I won't shelter you defense. We see this a lot with youth, right? Well, your parents don't want you to have any fun, but I do. I'll let you have fun, right? And so that makes the protective parent out to be bad and having bad intentions and withholding good, and that makes the predator out to be the hero, okay? It's a very old scheme. It's a very old strategy. 93% of offenders claim to be religious. They match the U.S. population in education, percentage married, and religious observance. Okay, so you cannot judge a book by its cover. Let's see. So we are mostly unaware of offenders. They are out there. Many of them are living their best life. They haven't been reported on. They haven't been caught. About 5% of the population does have an appetite for children. That's about 1 in 20 men, but this is much higher. Likely this is much, much higher because we see the demand for child sexual abuse and exploitation and trafficking. So, and this is also self-reporting, so who's going to self-report that? But we do know that the demand is there. Nearly 70% of child sex offenders have as many as 9 victims, and at least 20% have 10 to 40 victims. See, the problem with child predators is that they have built their success on deception, on scheming, on manipulation, on their charm, and each time they have successfully silenced one victim, it boosts their self-esteem, and they say, oh, I can silence another victim and another victim. And so the silence helps no one. It's a lose-lose situation when we are silent, when we are afraid to get involved, when we are afraid to step up and do the right thing for victims and hold offenders accountable. It's scary that only about 6% of child sex offenders are ever actually apprehended. And there's a lot of reasons for this, but many are, like I said, living their best life. Many survivors will tell you. I went through some of the warning signs. For adolescents, look for those that are self-destructive, considered promiscuous. Do they abuse drugs or alcohol? Probably something has happened traumatic in their life that they're trying to mask that pain. Almost 99% of the time to 100% of the time, if there is some form of self-harm, if they are inflicting self-harm upon themselves, there has been a sexual assault. This is highly correlated 99% of the time with sexual assault, self-mutilation is. And then eating disorders as well because of the desire to control. But the good news is that this can be prevented. We have seen prevention, and a lot of incredible success stories come out through prevention. Let's see, running out of time here. So we have seen a lot of success stories through Jenna's Law. And if you are not familiar, Jenna's Law passed in 2009. Governor Perry signed Jenna's Law in Texas, and it mandates sexual abuse prevention training for primary and secondary school students, school staff, and caregivers. And so it includes knowledge of warning signs that a child or youth may display if they've been a victim, actions a child who is a victim should take to obtain assistance and intervention, and available counseling options for students affected by sexual abuse. And since 2009, more states have adopted legislation reflecting the principles of Jenna's Law. And recently, the Jenna Quinn Law was made federal legislation. And here, Congressman Nathaniel Moran was one of our sponsors in the House for this bill. And we had a press release at the Smith County Child Advocacy Center. And so I'm so grateful for their support as well. But the Jenna Quinn Law passed the United States Senate unanimously 100-0 in 2020, 2022, and 2024. This was a 6-year battle to get this legislation enacted. And what it does is it promotes the community-based education and training for teachers, school staff to prevent sexual abuse, exploitation, and trafficking. And the best news of all is that it authorizes federal grants for these programs to go into the community and to go into schools and places where children and youth are, to train them and to train mandatory reporters. So it's beautiful that there's funding now from the Department of Health and Human Services specifically for prevention, because we have seen how prevention works and how successful prevention is when we can intervene in these cycles of grooming and in these cycles of abuse. So school personnel actually identify 52% of all child abuse cases classified as causing harm to the child. This is more than any other organizations that is making reports into the system. And so Darkness to Light research actually published in Youth Today that showed that after a Jenna's Law training, educators were about 4 times more likely to report versus their pre-training careers. And we also see that student reporting increases as well. So we know that this is working. We know that when we are all aware of this crime and we can identify it and we can see it for what it is, and when we can confront this, then children and youth and victims are more likely to get the help that they so desperately deserve. They're more likely to get the help that they so desperately need. And so as I wrap up, I want to share, I do have resources for you after this, the book and the e-course, so please come by, and I look forward to meeting you. I look forward to learning more about you and how I can be a resource. Please let me know. I am so grateful for what you do. I would not be here if it weren't for you. People are alive today. Victims are alive today because of the work that you do. People carry hope in their hearts. They carry power, they carry authority, and they got their personal power back because of someone like you. So I want to thank you. I want to tell you that I love you, and I look forward to talking with you afterwards. My contact information is here as well. If you need anything or don't feel like you can ask in person, feel free to scan the QR code and contact me for any other way I can be helpful to you. Thank you so very much. I love you all. God bless you. Okay.